acknowledge the Chippewa, Potawatomi, and Odawa nations, and this land that we are meeting in, and it's stolen land. I am Ganusino, Turtle Clan, Cayuga Nation, Six Nations Haudenosaunee Confederacy's Grand River Country on Turtle Island. And I come as somebody who has thought a lot about what it means to be an Indigenous person and to be a follower of Christ. Colonialism brought to this continent New England, New France, and New Spain. Through the colonial doctrine of discovery, which is a legal fiction, these various nations dispossessed Indigenous people of their land, and through the policy of assimilation, caused our people to experience national trauma. We were either to assimilate, and if we wouldn't assimilate, then we were exterminated. If we were not exterminated, then we were isolated. The policy of assimilation worked most virulently through the Indian residential school process, which has continued on through the 60s scoop that has already been mentioned here, to the current child welfare apprehension. In Canada, in particular, Manitoba is the worst place in the country. And what has happened with Western denominationalism, we were taught how to think like you, that is theology. We were taught to look like you, adopting your church culture. And we were taught to decide like you, having to embrace your church polity. And through catechism, there was a process of assimilation that worked by forcing us to ask colonial questions and the colonial answers to those questions. And I've asked the question myself, even of our own denomination, what is the difference between colonialism and denominationalism? And the answer is nothing. It works in the exact same manner. So in a sense, I did not come to Chicago to liberate evangelicalism, but to bury evangelicalism. Emphasis on the ism. I have with me here the two-row wampum, which is our method of recording sacred agreements. This is our text. We established this with the Dutch in 1613. They came up the Hudson River, named after Dutch explorer Henry Hudson, met the Mohawk people at the confluence of the Mohawk River and the Albany River that flowed down to New York City, that was named originally New Amsterdam. And the Dutch were looking for the opportunity to trade. They had to pay for their exploratory missions by finding something worth trading for inexpensively and then selling at a huge profit to pay off their loans. We, however, imagine this to be the relationship. The white belt of quahog shells, the purple shells are from quahog as well. They represent this broad belt represents the common river of life. One dark row represents the Dutch in their ship of state with their laws, their leaders, and their people. The other row represents the Haudenosaunee in our canoe of state with our laws, our leaders, and our people. There are three rows of beads in between, and each of these rows have a principle that describes good relationships. The first row is the desire for friendship. People in Canada have laughed at the word, Indigenous people in Canada have laughed at the word reconciliation, because to reconcile means to make friends again, and Indigenous people have said, well, you never were friends in the first place. The second row represents respect, and when you respect somebody, that's the basis for peace. The third row is when you have these relationships established in the right way, then you have a strong relationship with each other. We made this in 1613 with the Dutch, later with the Americans, later with the British, or before with the British, then the Americans, and then with Canada. And then whenever we have conflicts, we bring out this belt and remind our allies that we have a relationship with them based on this. Most recently, it was brought out in 2006 with a land claim conflict in Caledonia, Southern Ontario. And we said, this is what we said in the beginning, we still mean it. So our answer to peaceful relations is still the same answer. Now, when I think about the Great Commission, I think about how that Jesus talked about making disciples of all the nations. And then in the book, on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit comes and the voices of all the nations speak of the good things of God. And the great convergence story in the book of Revelation gives a picture of the city of God that's come out of heaven and is now on the earth permanently. And that there's 12 gates into the city from the 4 directions. And it says that into those gates come the nations of the earth, with their kings or their leaders, and with their glorious nations. So in this image, whatever Jesus meant by discipling the nations, it does not destroy nations the way colonialism did. And when I have talked with my Indigenous folks about what a nation is, it consists of 4 things. Number 1, land. Just like when Adam and Eve were created and they were placed in a land. Secondly, it is language. Out of the land comes the lessons of the land, and the land shapes language. One of the reasons why the people were afraid during the time of Babel was because as people separated from each other, as time passed, and through human genius, working with the various lands, the languages were being diversified. And the language police were concerned. And so they conceived this one project of human genius, this tower, that would take everybody's attention. This idol would bring everybody together so that they could speak one language. And the language police won, at least in that place, until God said otherwise. And jump-started that language diversification until we have the cacophony that is represented here, or that should be represented in what is being presented. And then the third element is after the people learn how to live in the land, the culture is shaped. And then there is a governance that is special and unique with each nation. And so what happened, however, in the case of the church was that the church was involved in the treaties and translating the language and were complicit in the theft of our lands. The church required us to accept their church language and their idioms and their ways of speaking. and concepts. And they changed our language. And then they changed and made us accept their music and culture, so that we acted as they did as well, and then forced us to accept their polity. I'm here to say that when I enter into that place, I will not enter into the city as a poor imitation of someone else, and someone else's culture, and someone else's language, somebody else's ways of doing things, and somebody else's way of deciding. I will enter that place as Gunnison, as Cayuga Nation, as Turtle Clan, as the Six Nations Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I will enter in with what is making me unique and special and who I am as the Creator made me. And I have never ever in my life felt empty. Emptiness, and this whole idea of Christ filling this emptiness, is a Western construct through a vacuous identity that tries to define itself by, I'm not savage. Well, I'm not your savage. I'm not your noble savage. I am who I am, and Jesus has simply helped me to be the good person that I am. Our word for ourselves is Ongohoi, the original beings who live forever. Our word for ourselves is Haudenosaunee, which means the people that continually add to the longhouse. That's who I am, and that's who I, as a follower of Christ, will do in entering into that place.